Brad, great to meet you. Thanks for doing this. It seems like nothing's happening, but yet here we are recording. Today is May the 6th, and there's a lot going on both in your country and my country. So, I got to start off with, Carney being at the White House today.
Yeah, I mean, we just recently had our election. I'm not sure how many of your listeners are Canadian, but we had this guy, Pierre Poilievre, who was 97% likely to win the conservative. He's the conservative candidate. And when Trump got elected, um, there's also Trump derangement syndrome here in Canada, almost kind of like worse than in the United States in some areas. And as crazy as it is, that is what caused Mark Carney to win the election. Was just Canadians, specifically mostly boomers. A lot of young Canadians ended up voting for Pierre Poilievre. It was a record turnout for the Conservatives, largest vote share since like the 1980s. And the student vote went Conservative. The young people broke for the Conservatives, just like they did in the States. But the boomers, they're afraid of losing their the Ponzi benefits that they've got from the housing market here, massively overheated, much worse than the United States. So, life's been good for the boomers over the last little bit. Not all boomers, obviously. There's like wealthy and not wealthy, but anybody that was middle class basically is now a millionaire in Canada for just owning a home. So yeah, there was a massive sort of Trump derangement syndrome situation happening, and the media here is very much owned by the government. I mean, it's not really, but it's federally funded. So it'd be like the National Public Radio, the NPR, getting, prime time and getting $14 billion a year from the US government and being the primary source of information. So yeah, we got a little bit of a problem here. It's low information voters, super afraid of Trump, and wasn't enough for Pierre Poilievre. He wasn't able to get the job done.
What was your expectations going into the election of what you thought the outcome was going to be?
Well, a lot of us thought, including many on the left, also thought that the conservatives were going to win because Trudeau became massively unpopular, and there was just scandal after scandal and inept thing after inept thing, from bringing a Nazi into the House of Commons, into the Parliament, and celebrating him, and then only realizing after that he was a he was a Nazi, and to just like billions of dollars of scandals and just being a national embarrassment all over the world. So Trudeau was extremely unpopular all across the country. Everybody knew it, but when they just perfectly timed it. So it wasn't until January of this year that we started to get a little nervous, being like, maybe the Liberals have a chance to pull this off with Trump's election and everybody getting the TDS affliction down here, and then them bringing in Mark Carney, who's kind of like the same as what we've had over the last 10 years, but he's a new face that they could just really push behind. And immediately all these folks that were aware that the liberal government was in trouble and that they were likely not going to get elected, they just rallied behind him because they didn't care to look into his past very much, and his policies and his conflicts of interest. But it was the new guy that they could. It's almost like a hockey team, or you know what I mean? It's like a football team or whatever up there. I don't know what what you guys have as a national game aside from hockey. If there's like baseball and football and all this stuff, maybe there's I don't know, the New York something or another's, the Jets and the Mets and the whatever
Yankees,
they
the
are,
Yankees.
the Yankees. Yeah, it's like here in Canada, hockey is huge, obviously, but you're born into a hockey team. I'm sure it's like that in the States too with teams. You're kind of born into a team and it's hard to leave the team.
Yeah, especially in the Midwest where I'm from, like football. I mean, it's here. I give you a perfect analogy. I'm from Cleveland, and the Browns have sucked since they came back in the league in 1999. But every home opener, People are down there getting shit faced, thinking this year is going to be different. And pretty much in 25 years, I mean, they made the playoffs twice. And it's really funny. Sidetracking for a second, they trade all this money, or excuse me, made this guy the highest paid player at one point in the league, bunch of draft picks for a quarterback that had 21, I think, women accuse him of sexual allegations, sexual misconduct. They bring this guy in, pay him all this money. He's torn his Achilles twice. He was suspended for the first year from the league. Now the team is asking for money for a new stadium, and they're going to get it. And people are excited about it.
Sounds like Canadian politics right there.
And yet, their irony in that is they're going to they want a dome on this stadium. And I said, what's the purpose of a dome? This team doesn't. The playoffs are in January. They don't make the playoffs. What's the purpose? What do we need a dome for? But they're going to get it, Brad.
Yeah, that sounds exactly like Canadian politics. I mean, we've got rising crime, our productivity is stalled, investment has gone through the tank. The liberal government is basically over the last 10 years just put in all these climate extremism activist policies to keep the oil and gas in the ground. And our economy has suffered a lot. Our government has grown 40%. The federal bureaucracy has grown 40% since the pandemic. And just like in the States and probably all modern countries, they've printed obscene amounts of money. Trudeau printed more money than all other prime ministers in Canada since Confederation combined. So they massively expanded our debt, massively expanded the government bureaucracy. And at this point, 1 in every 4 Canadian employed individuals are working in the public sector. So the public sector has just gone like this, and the private sector went like this. It was kind of keeping pace, and then COVID hit, and then it's kind of come back, but not really. It's kind of flattening off. And entrepreneurship has just really just flatlined over the last 5 years. Like people, there's not as much of an entrepreneurial culture here anymore. And because most of the money that gets printed through stimulus and debt goes into government, growing the government, our productivity just keeps stalling because, as we know, the government's not very productive.
Why do you think entrepreneurship has dropped so much? Is it because of, the taxes are so high that people are like, I'm never going to be able to get ahead? I mean, I look at that like living in California, and I love California, but that state is just such a financial disaster that you have to be making so much money or else you're never going to get ahead.
Yeah, I think it's partly because in Canada, we did this COVID stimulus called CERB, and it was basically like $2,000 a month. You could get $2,000 a month. So a lot of young people, it shows in this, I think, in the entrepreneur chart, it shows it's a lagging sort of indicator that shows like when you're just unable to afford life and you're unable to afford a home, the interest rates are too expensive on your debt, and the down payment that you need to buy a home is just kind of seems out of sight for a young person. That will show up later on, I believe, as lagging productivity and disinterest in entrepreneurship. So there's definitely higher taxes here. That's a factor. Like you're saying, it's like California. There's rising crime. Just it's not good for the young people here in Canada. It's not the worst, but it's really not healthy. I think we're going to suffer even more capital flight, even more brain drain. And Mark Carney has been talking about positively affecting some change here in Canada, which has been surprising over the last few days. A week ago, the election happened, and he ran a campaign of kind of fear, fear of Trump. And he was saying things like, our relationship with the United States is over. We're going to have to forge a new relationship with Europe, and we're not going to be trading with the United States anymore. And, the premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, was threatening to turn the power off to Minnesota and the other countries where Ontario sends power. I mean, it got pretty contentious up here. People are booing the national anthem at hockey games and stuff like that. So our media and our left political party really tried to do this fear mongering, like anti-American kind of Trump thing, and it worked. Like it scared a lot of people into thinking the number one issue for our country is Trump, which is insane because for all the young people that are, like this is a generational divide really, because the young people are worried about the cost of living, the high taxes, the housing crisis, rising crime, all these issues, and it's about their future. And the boomer generation is about like what are they seeing on TV? What is the newspaper telling them? And they're so scared of Trump because that's what everything was centered around. And it won. And then as soon as he wins, what's he doing? Well, now he's going to meet with Trump at the White House, and he's probably going to try to do some concessions. And it's pretty interesting because Carney was a Goldman Sachs guy for like 10 years. And then, he entered the public sector, became a governor of the Bank of Canada. And then, or sorry, I think he was but Governor of Bank of Canada. And then he went to become the governor of the Bank of England. And then he was at Brookfield for 10 years. I think 10 years. I don't know how many. He was at Brookfield for a long time. And Brookfield's one of the larger asset manager companies in the world. They're up there with like, you know, mixing around with BlackRock and Vanguard and things like that. And so Mark Carney is somewhat of like a insider, you know what I mean? He's going to WEF and he's going to Davos and he's meeting with the royalty of the world, and he's cutting deals and putting together these multi-billion-dollar acquisition projects, investing in oil in Saudi Arabia and doing all these things through Brookfield. And he's actually been, helped Kushner and Trump with a loan through Brookfield. And I'm pretty sure, I don't know the exact details of this. I just keep seeing this online that there was a deal that he helped broker between Trump and then also something about Elon Musk getting some funding for Tesla or something, one of his companies. So Carney is an insider. He's like a climate activist insider. So he kind of like is a bit of a government grifter. You know what I mean? He's not really a businessman. He's just one of those guys that comes up with financial engineering products and puts deals together and helps to influence policy so that his investments with his company that he was chair of can benefit greatly from forcing investment into green energy projects. So he's like on that side of trying to weaponize capitalism for what he believes is the good of the planet and the good of the country, but also needs to make sure the shareholders are made whole and is doing deals with Trump and his associates. So it's kind of crazy that they were able to pull the wool over all of Canada's eyes with Mark Carney like that.
Almost like he was what's the word I'm looking for? Like they put him in to infiltrate the system, and through all those experience, he's part of the agenda, and yet the Canadians don't realize what they just voted for.
Yeah, very low information voters here in Canada. I'm sure it's the same in the United States in many ways. But yeah, it was sad to see the way the things went, especially because the young people broke so much for the conservatives, and they kind of got the real understanding of like what the country needs to change. And the older generation, majority of them broke for their traditional gonna vote liberal because, oh, he's a businessman and he understands how to deal with Trump. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I'm kind of he's doing a few things that have been kind of calming me down a little bit from having to leave. I was pretty sure I was going to have to leave, and a lot of my friends and I'm still making some arrangements to have an option to get out of here if things get even worse. But he's making some statements and doing some things that are sort of pragmatic. Like he's taking policies from the conservative platform that Pierre Poilievre ran on. He's talking about getting rid of these crazy bail laws that the liberals introduced and clamping down on the free opioids. Like in Canada, there's provinces here. It's like in California, on the west coast of Canada, they've decriminalized all hard drugs and they basically give opioids to anybody. Just they call it harm reduction. And it's caused a massive crisis of
Harm reduction.
overdosing. And yeah, it's like they've tried this thing, and it's just like here's some government drugs at a government funded drug den, and the cops can't arrests people because similar to, it's not the exact same, but it's like in California where people under $800 they just can't be arrested. The cops aren't arresting people because I think it's a misdemeanor or something like that. This all across Canada here. They've got these empathetic laws on the books where you have to release somebody under the least onerous circumstances and the most timely manner, some sort of weird wording. And what it means is that like our crime has risen like crazy over the last 10 years. It's people breaking into garages and breaking into houses, stealing cars, and even violent crime is rising. And it's the cops are frustrated because they don't have the power to deal with it. So he seems that was what the conservative guy was trying to push for, like just more sane, common sense policies. He wasn't really speaking super populist like you see in some countries. He was just trying to keep it centrist, right centrist, you know what I mean? Like just common sense stuff. And it resonated with a lot of people, but obviously it wasn't enough.
Where would you have gone, or where would you go?
Well, there's a couple options. Alberta is currently exploring separating from Canada because that was another problem. I mean, we've got this situation here in Canada where equalization payments are made from province to province. And as part of joining Canada, the provinces agreed to this equalization scheme. And basically, provinces like Alberta, which are resource rich, they contribute massively to this equalization program. So they send federal money, income taxes, and revenues from oil and gas to the federal government. And then the federal government transfers that money to equalize services across the provinces. So provinces like where I'm from on the East Coast get money from the federal government for healthcare and different things, right? So Alberta is kind of screwed. Like for the last 10 years, they've paid in $250 billion more than they've received from the federal government in services. So not only does Alberta pay extreme amounts of money to the federal government, but then the federal government is blockading them on both sides because they've passed bills that ban pipelines and West Coast oil tankers and stuff like that. So really the only option Alberta has is to send the oil down to the United States through a pipeline or on trains. And so Warren Buffett's making tons of money off the Alberta, like the Canadian oil industry, because of the pipeline bans. So I think there's an extra like 20 or $30 added to the cost of oil in Canada because we don't have the pipelines. We have to put it on trains. It's more expensive. And so Alberta is just sick of it. And you must be familiar with the sovereign individual thesis in the book. It basically in the book, it talks about how you would see Canada break up before you'd see problems with the United States. And we're starting to see that now. I mean, the succession talk of Alberta wanting to leave Confederation and to be their own independent republic or potentially join with the United States. Who knows what's going to happen there? But this is all because of this sort of radical environmental net zero policy that our liberal government has been trying to force on Canadians. And so there's this real strong Texas-like culture in Alberta, and it's, you know, free speech, property rights, sound money, things like that. They respect proof of work basically as a, you know, kind of like a Bitcoin theme. So I was thinking Texas or Alberta or some other country that respects free speech and property rights. It's hard to find those these days.
Yeah, and you know the question I have with the whole Alberta secession is, and some I've had it explained to me. I mean, top level that it's possible, but can you see the federal Canadian government allowing this to happen, just letting them walk away? This episode is brought to you by McIlvaney Financial Group. Their advisors bring a depth of knowledge and experience that allow them to serve their clientele with care, ensuring their financial needs are met now and in the future. Personally, I'm not saying cash is worthless, but you can see what's happening. It's worth less every year. Gold is the opposite. Click on the promo link in the show notes or go to www.mcilvaney.com/coffee and a mic.
Well, the divorce papers are kind of already written because this happened in the 90s with Quebec, and there was a long drawn out process to negotiate the province's exit from Canada. So the laws are already passed, and it's clear what needs to happen. So yeah, it's definitely. I mean, it's in our country's founding, and it's in Alberta has the ability to not only exit Canada, but they have the majority of the pension assets of Canada. Like they've contributed and they own. If they were to exit, they would be taking more than half of Canada's pension plan with them. So it's a the average like liberal voter here in Canada just did not understand the gravity of the decision to vote another term for the Liberals, who have completely destroyed our economy and turned us from being like one of the happiest, kind of like most educated, highest quality of life countries in the G20 to now flatlining. Over the last 10 years, our GDP has been like 2%, not per year, but like overall in real terms. And I bet you if you measured that in gold, it's probably negative 10% or something like that. So yeah, our country is not doing so well right now, but Mark Carney's kind of trying to keep things together. He's trying to be pragmatic. The credit rating agencies recently came out after he was elected and said, hey, Canada's probably going to be downgraded. Mark Carney's economic plan for the next 3 years is going to downgrade our rating from AAA to like AA, maybe lower. So he seems to be kind of taking some of this stuff to heart. It was basically 50-50 between the conservatives and the liberals. So they did not win a majority government. There's no sweeping mandate to kind of just push his plan through. And he seems to be kind of like taking advantage of the trends. And hopefully now he's going to implement some reasonable policies and kind of realize that the country's going to fall apart here if he actually keeps on with this climate sort of number one priority is to prevent carbon dioxide from entering the atmosphere, because like we're really 0.1% of carbon emissions or something crazy like that in Canada. It's not we're like a test bed for these policies. And so the the capitulation of these carbon market policies and carbon, taxes and carbon tariffs and all this stuff that we've been dealing with in Canada would be bad for all those people that have been kind of like making their careers around like climate risk pricing and all these financial models and financial products around carbon and the environment. So they're really incentivized to try to push this forward and keep it going here, because if we stop doing this stuff in Canada where we've been kind of like taking the lead and taking the bullet for everybody else, then I don't think anybody else is going to follow along. But it's not worth it to sacrifice our country and our youth because China's not doing this stuff and India's not doing this stuff, and they're the major contributors to carbon dioxide and pollution. So yeah, it's kind of I'm more hopeful this week than I was 2 weeks ago. We'll say that. So I'm not like packing my bags and running, but thank God I have Bitcoin, because the Canadian dollar is probably going to take a dump, and the Canadian economy is going to continue going down. So, if I didn't have Bitcoin, I'd probably be a lot more upset, honestly. I'd probably be pretty anxious to get out of here.
Well, what did you think when you saw Carney at the White House today, and just overall seeing him and Trump together? I didn't get to watch the whole thing, but
I mean, it's what I expected. Like I said, he's Goldman Sachs, he's Brookfield, he's rubbing elbows with all these same sort of people. There's it's kind of yet to be seen, like how pragmatic is he, and how much is he gonna give on his altruistic, if that's what he's gonna claim as altruism, his carbon stuff. How much is he gonna give up of that, pushing that stuff in the name of saving Canada from further decline? And if he does make the right choice for Canada, then I don't think it would be too bad actually. I actually don't care if a liberal government fixes things and puts the policies that the conservative government was going to do in place or starts to adopt them. I mean, hey, that's a win. I'm not like tribal like that. Like I'm not, oh, I'm a conservative and it has to be a conservative that fixes the country and fixes the housing crisis and gets our GDP going again and gets our productivity up and helps bolster the entrepreneurship sector here in Canada, the self-employed sector and the private sector. It doesn't matter to me. Like I just am very nervous about him wanting to adopt European style policies and continuing to want to push. Like his career has been all around this stuff. Like no matter what, he's a Keynesian, so he's gonna want to continue to stimulate and print money and grow the government, which kind of you'll get anyways, whether it's a conservative or not. It'll just be less, hopefully, with a conservative. But yeah, I think with the way he's been going about it, things the last week, it seems like he's going to be able to make a deal with Trump. But um, I don't know what the deal's going to be. We'll see, I guess.
Yeah, I just when I see that, it just what is happening behind the scenes right now, and we were talking offline, and I shared with you some of my friend Matt Smith's posts, and which I find I keep bringing this up, and I'm kind of beating a dead horse here, but like nobody's talking about what role Bitcoin might have, sovereign wealth fund, what this Trump administration is attempting to do, with Scott Besson and Howard Lutnick, and and what will stable coins play in all this? What will gold's role be in all this? I find this fascinating. Maybe and I said this before. Maybe I'm just boring, Brad. The India Pakistan doesn't. I'm just not intrigued by that because if they're gonna kill each other, what can I do about it?
Yeah, I'm not. There's only so much that you can follow, right? There's like a lot of stuff going on with AI as well that I'm more interested in, just to sort of see how that's going to be like a structural shift in economies and just technology that we have in our lives that makes us more productive. And like that's a hard one to wrap your mind around. So not only we have all these other things happening, but I'm not sure if you're a fan of like I said, The Sovereign Individual and books like Fourth Turning or Ray Dalio's work on like principles for changing world order, things like that. Have you looked into that stuff much?
I have. I mean, not. I mean, top level. Watch Ray Dalio's interviews. Watch Neil Howe's interviews. I haven't read The Fourth Turning yet, which is a book I need to add to my list. But I watched his interview. He's been hitting the media circuit a lot lately. I see.
Yeah, I think he's really concerned. It seems like we're getting closer and closer to the big debt boom part of the cycle. And those are the things I try to spend my time on thinking like long term. What's gonna be the next 10 years? Like what's the most likely trajectory that we're headed on over the next 10 years? And then I try to pay less attention to the day to day, like, oh, this country's saber rattling and like, look what this politician said and whatever it is, because you can't really have much of an effect on that. And I find it's a waste of time to be preoccupied with like, look what this person said and look what this politician did and look what this country's going to do. And it's like, I'd rather spend my time going to the gym and working on my goals, spend time with my family, play some sports, read a book, whatever it is, and just think about the longer term things. So right now, based off of all the things I've been reading and listening to over the last few years, it just seems like we're in a new era of like more conflict, major change in the world, huge economic disruption from technological shifts and from things like Bitcoin changing money. And we're near the end, or we got maybe 10 more years left of of this QE sort of experiment where they can continue to print money, and we live under this idea that this debt will ever get paid back without things turning really bad. But it's already turning. We're already seeing it. Like conflict is picking up all over the world. It's the end of that whole era where the US was the keeper of the peace of the world and policing all the shipping lanes and all every other country's borders and stuff. And they were, had this arrangement with every country that, use the dollar and we'll protect you, and you don't have to worry about protecting your trade routes and stuff. Well, that's obviously come to an end, at least in this sort of phase of whatever this next cycle is going to be. Maybe the US will reestablish dominance and they'll be like Bretton Woods 3.0 or something like that, where we go back onto the dollar as the reserve currency of the world, and the US reasserts its might and countries sort of fall in line and whatever. But it doesn't seem like it. It seems like things are going back to more of this historical pattern, and things are going to decentralize. The dollar's not going to be the main currency of the world. It's not going to have that hegemonic benefit. It's going to be like a major thing in our lives for the foreseeable future. But Bitcoin is on the rise. Gold is obviously gaining. The BRICS, countries, people talk about that a lot. I mean, it's kind of cliche at this point to say BRICS, but just think that like China and Brazil and India, and all just them, like that's billions of people have chosen to move away from using the dollar as their currency to settle trade with. They're still using it. It's still majority settling the majority of trade in the world. But the fact that the trajectory has now shifted away from that is the way things are being done. It could take 10 years before something else is like equally as used as the dollar. But that shift, that time is going to be chaotic. It's going to be disruptive. There's going to be lots of conflict. And Bitcoin is in this kind of like in this cycle of artificial intelligence kind of like making these crazy rapid advancements and leaps. It's just so hard to even pay attention to the AI advancements. Like every week there's 10 major announcements coming out of these AI companies. I used to try to follow it closely, but then I was just like, this is impossible. I can't even follow it. So you see how fast that's going. And then you're also the same thing with Bitcoin. And now Bitcoin is kind of on this inevitable path of global reserve asset status over the next 10 years. I imagine it's going to be US Treasuries, Bitcoin, gold, and maybe something else, some other commodities or something like that. But it's the balkanization of the currency and the assets, the reserve currency and the reserve assets. That's a super disruptive time, but there's also a lot of opportunity there. So I try to, as little as I can, pay attention to politics and conflict and stuff like that, and as much as I can, just try to improve myself and work on my own shit and try to find a way to get more Bitcoin.
In the simple terms, right? You still have to live your life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm a kind of an activist, as much as Mark Carney might be a net zero activist, I'd say I'm a sound money, Bitcoin activist. So I can't help but want to be paying attention to what things are going on in the world with Bitcoin. But and because of that, I'm always hit with all the news of like what people are saying about Bitcoin. Oh, this country wants to ban Bitcoin, and Europe is now trying to register everybody's wallets and all this stuff. So for sure, it sucks to your inputs are always being corrupted by this barrage of information that's not positive. So it's tough to control that, especially when I'm just coming out of this election, where it's kind of like the most important election of my life in my country. And I had to pay a lot of attention to it more than I normally would want to because it was so close. And I felt like I could personally have an effect on it if I just influenced enough people towards the logical path here. So I was way too obsessed with the election. But now that it's over, I'm kind of transitioning back into that phase of like, okay, well, there's nothing I can do about this now. And I'm not like my identity stack that is not like conservative or Republican. You know what I mean? It's my identity stack is Bitcoiner, and that's kind of it. So, so because the conservative guy, I registered for the Conservative Party. I've attended a bunch of fundraisers. I donated the max. I went door knocking with my MP. I got really active, but they lost, and I was able to just kind of like close that box. Where I see a lot of people that I've started to follow are just kind of like now they're consumed by this. They're just every single word Mark Carney says, they're hanging on to it. And I'm just like, who cares really at this point? Like, there's nothing you can do about it. Complaining about it and covering it and doing shows constantly about what Mark Carney's doing is kind of like what he's going to do, what he's going to do. And like the next 4 years are going to play out how they're going to play out. You just go back internal now and see what you can do to. Now, if you got a media company and you're able to make money off of covering the politics or whatever, sure, that makes sense. But a lot of people just become so consumed, they make politics their identity, and it doesn't help. It doesn't help them or their families. It just kind of like distracts you and kind of makes you agitated and irritated at home.
You're somebody that got involved in Bitcoin. I mean, 2011, I think, right?
Yeah.
So you're coming on almost 15, or I can do my math right here, 14
Yeah,
plus
pretty
years.
much.
Are you looking at when you started all this to seeing where it's at now? I mean, life is not a straight line.
Yeah, especially when you're in something as volatile as Bitcoin. I mean, life is a roller coaster, basically. I keep getting on the roller coaster. You can see this is like the 2012 bear market. This is the 2017 crisis. This is the Mt. Gox hack. My beard is just full of all these like 70, 80, 90% drops in my net worth.
I
I
don't
wear
mean
it
to,
as
I
a
don't mean to
badge, I
laugh,
guess.
Brad. It's just funny the way you're wording it.
Yeah, well, that's pretty much it. Every cycle, like you can see the cycles in my beard. Like I got a new white patch of hair every cycle of Bitcoin. It's funny. I read this book, Money Master the Game. Tony Robbins wrote it, like 2015 or something like that. And in the book, he talks about the story of this guy that's a UPS driver, and he all he ever did was he put his savings into the S&P 500. He didn't trade stocks. All he did was just basically every paycheck he would get paid basically minimum wage for whatever the time was. He started investing in like the 1940s or something like that, and he lived through the Great Depression and Black Monday and Black Thursday and all like the 90s collapse and the dot-com bubble collapse. He lived through all this stuff, 2008. And in the end, he retired with like $20 million, and he was just a UPS driver. Now, I might be butchering the story a little bit, but the kind of gist of that story was he held and dollar cost averaged and continued to hold. And it wasn't until those last 10 years where the compounding effect of that really took hold and he gained like, I don't know, 80% of the dollar nominal value. But his long-term holding was what, he lived through all of these like crazy events that we think of as one-time situations that would have wiped people out, but he just never sold. He kept holding. And so it was like a pitch for indexing, right? And dollar cost averaging over trying to time markets. And I realized like I lived that in like 9 years. Like I lived an entire lifetime of someone's entire life of investing in like the 10 years of being in Bitcoin. And I was thinking about that one day and I was like, that's kind of crazy that I've learned all those lessons in 10 years. Because honestly, I did. I went through every possible lesson you could learn, from trusting people and being foolish and impulsive and having counterparties fail on you, not diversifying too much, listening to insiders, taking bad tips, like every single possible lesson you could possibly learn. I learned it from being in Bitcoin for so long. And now it's just like yeah, I don't know. I'm still learning. Obviously, it's not that long when you compare it to a lot of people that have been investing, but it's been a wild journey, that's for sure. It's been very volatile, but in the end, it's kind of made me more confident in Bitcoin, and now I'm even still buying Bitcoin now. Like I'm about to sell my home because I moved into this new house that here I'm recording at. It's my wife's dream house, and I financed it with Bitcoin. So one of the lessons I learned from previous cycle was not to sell Bitcoin. because in my previous life as a or my previous in the previous cycle of Bitcoin in 2018, I sold 21 Bitcoin to pay off my mortgage, which was $230,000. And I thought that was a smart diversification strategy. I was like, I'm going to sell some, I'm going to take some off the table, and I won't have any monthly payments for my mortgage. So paid off the mortgage. Well, obviously that was a terrible move because that 21 Bitcoin would have been worth, nearly $3 million Canadian at this point. So it 10x'd in price where the home gained like 50% or, maybe double in value. So obviously that was a bad move. But now I'm about to sell that house. What is it, 6 years later? No, I'm almost 7 years later. And I'm going to buy Bitcoin with it. So I'm going to be able to buy back two of my Bitcoin, maybe three. So, so I'm still stacking to this day. I'm still trying to stack more Bitcoin.
Well, what do you say when people will push back on you, Brad, and be like, selling your house to buy more Bitcoin? What are you thinking?
I think it's just I've done so much research on this, on monetary history, on everything else that there is to invest in, and I don't see anything else that can potentially keep up with Bitcoin over the next decade. So I don't blame them for that. I just, it's a information gap really. Like I just know a lot more about Bitcoin and am more confident in Bitcoin than most people. So I just see it as a no-brainer.
What about how if any if at all will gold factor in?
I mean, I'm not like against gold. I have some gold, and it's funny. My story with that is I learned about Bitcoin because of Peter Schiff and guys like Peter Schiff. It was back in 2008 when Ron Paul started his campaign for president. I seen him in this documentary that Andrew Russo, I think his name was, did called "Freedom to Fascism," America, Freedom to Fascism. And in the documentary, he talks about the history of the creation of the Federal Reserve and income taxes and things like that. And Ron Paul was in the documentary, and he had a sign on his desk that said, "Don't steal. The government hates competition." so, so I was like, "Well, who's this congressman that like thinks that like that? I got to see who this guy is." So I started. I started paying attention to Ron Paul after seeing him in that. And he was talking about the Federal Reserve and ending the Fed and the history of gold as money and, ending all these wars, these unconstitutional wars that are just financed through the money printer. So I really started to resonate with the libertarian Austrian economics sort of sound money thesis. And I was an entrepreneur at the time, so I was kind of like just didn't know much about money. I was making money, but I didn't know much about money. So as I started to read more books about monetary history and gold, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and in there, Robert Kiyosaki talked about gold and real estate as two stores of value. So I started to slowly get the information about, maybe putting money in the bank wasn't the best idea for long-term wealth accumulation. And I kind of came of age, as an adult during that whole great financial crisis and the Wall Street, Occupy Wall Street, where everybody's pissed off about the bailouts and stuff. And Peter Schiff was out talking about, don't be mad at the capitalists in New York. Be mad at the government. Be mad at the central bank. And he was obviously an advocate of gold. So I was kind of influenced by all these guys. And so I was like, at this point, it seemed to me like the stock market was a Ponzi scheme back in like 2011. And I'm like, I need to get some gold because my dollars are going to continue to go down over time. There's no sense having them in the bank account. I'm barely getting paid anything. Doesn't even keep up with the inflation. So I got to get some gold. So I started to slowly buy gold. And then I did, they start talking about silver and the silver's going to go on this mega bull run. And so silver was $50 at the time. It was that time when silver took a huge run back in 2011. I think it was 10 or 11. And so I was like, you know what? I don't know which one to choose. So, because I had learned about Bitcoin at that same time, as I was learning about gold, I had watched this YouTube video from the guy who was a gold bug, but he was like, you got to also learn about this digital gold. It's like decentralized gold of the internet. And since I was a millennial growing up, technology adopter, I'm like, this is huge. This is going to be massive. This thing could be worth $10,000 one day, this Bitcoin. That's where my mind was. As the most it could be worth someday was $10,000. And it was $10 at the time. So I thought, I didn't have much money at the time because I had just purchased a vehicle and I had started a new family and I just bought my house. I put the down payment on my house to build the house that I sold the 21 Bitcoin to pay off the mortgage. And so I bought gold, silver, and Bitcoin. I just kind of like three ways split it up. I was like, I don't know which one's going to win, so I'm going to buy a third gold, a third silver, and a third Bitcoin. And since then, obviously, you can tell which one did the best, but I still have the gold and the silver, and I don't have all the Bitcoin, unfortunately. But the Bitcoin is up like 800,000% since the day I bought it. The gold is done pretty good too. The gold, I think I was buying at like six, seven, $800 an ounce. But the silver is still down. The silver was $50 an ounce when I bought it, so I'm still down on my silver purchase, and I still hold it as a lesson. Actually, every once in a while, I'll give like a 5 ounce ingot to somebody, being like, here, go sell this for Bitcoin. Just take it, sell it for Bitcoin as an exercise, so you can understand what's going on here with commodity money. But yeah, I'm still a fan of gold, but I'm not really much of a fan of silver.
Brad, I don't know how many times you've shared this on conversations before, but I thank you for sharing the story with me because you're an excellent storyteller. That was fantastic.
Thanks.
Because the irony of all of this is you're a Bitcoin guy. You got into Bitcoin because of gold, precious metals, yet you have the least amount of Bitcoin in comparison to your precious metals. It's just a great story.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's Peter Schiff is the guy that eventually got me to Bitcoin. I would never have found Bitcoin if it wasn't for Peter Schiff. So even though Peter Schiff's constantly dunking on Bitcoin on Twitter and hating on Bitcoin, I just have like a soft spot in my heart for Peter Schiff because he's like, okay, Grandpa, you go on with your gold, Grandpa. Thanks for all you've done for the family.
Well, he was the biggest thing out there in 2008. It was him and Rubini, right? Dr. Doom. Those were
Yeah,
like the
yeah,
two that
yeah.
I mean, I was working in retail banking here in the States, and I don't even know how I came across Peter Schiff, but it was always, what did he say? Like, you have to take the medicine. You have to take the medicine here. We're not willing to take the medicine. We're just dealing with the symptoms, not the disease. He was saying that in '08 and '09.
Yeah, he was one of the guys they would always bring on to talk about the bailouts and the housing crisis because he was one of the people that were calling a housing bubble in like 2006 and 2007 along with Ron Paul. So they kept bringing him on CNBC or whatever, CNN, Fox, all these news shows as one of these experts to talk, and he would always just end up shilling gold the whole time. It's great.
I remember somebody came into the bank and they said they called his company and said they couldn't even get a phone call back. He wanted to put a bunch of money and buy a bunch of gold, and he's like, yeah, it was customer service was horrible. Couldn't get anyone to even contact me.
Too busy partying.
With what appears in the United States right now, the centralization that they're attempting to do with reindustrializing America, Bitcoin being, it's a decentralization, right, of decentralized currency. How will that play in? Because, this is what I don't understand, and maybe you can explain this to me like I'm 5 years old, because it seems that Bitcoin is going to play a role in this reindustrialization of America. But if it's a decentralized currency, do you see the government taking this over or somehow not allowing it to remain decentralized?
I think it goes back to that whole concept of manifest destiny that drives a lot of American innovators and influential entrepreneurs and the greatest minds that have kind of come out of America. And it's unique to America because I feel like in Europe and in other countries there's less of that spirit. And it was Robert Kennedy Jr. actually said at the Bitcoin 2022 or 2023 conference that after he learned about Bitcoin and really started to dig into it and understand the decentralized nature of it and how it works and how it's based off of proof of work and energy, he really felt like once he got to know the people involved in advocating for Bitcoin and what we're asking for, we're not asking for favors. We're just asking for freedom. And, it's protection of our rights, our property rights in this digital world. and to try to create more wealth in America and in whatever country that they're in. But as Robert Kennedy Jr. was meeting these folks, he realized that and he said this, and it was pretty cool. He said that the current spirit of the founding fathers of America is alive in the Bitcoin movement. And he could see that in the Bitcoiners. And he said it was the most concentrated sort of spirit of the founding fathers you could see in the Bitcoiners, which was really interesting for me to sort of observe that as a Canadian. And I'd kind of, feel like that myself. I've noticed that as well. Like the people that fight for protecting your rights to be able to have free speech and to be able to hold your own wealth are the Bitcoiners. I mean, sure, gold as well, but Bitcoin is digital money for a digital age. It's a technology that's based on freedom of speech. I mean, the code that backs Bitcoin is free speech. Like code is speech and Bitcoin is code. It's like free speech money. And the people that created the impetus to Bitcoin, the cryptography that backs some of Bitcoin are the cypherpunks. And this is like a movement from back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. These cypherpunks were trying to advocate for, and I guess they were activists, really, where they were trying to prevent the government from banning encryption. Because at one point, the government was so afraid of encryption, they wanted to ban it. They wanted to make it illegal for you to use encryption. And the cypherpunks would kind of protest this, and they would fight the government, and they would try to protect our right for encryption. And that led us to being able to have end-to-end encrypted messages, because now, as we know, the sort of surveillance panopticon of Silicon Valley and the way the government interfered in surveilling people and monitoring what we say and do on the internet without having the constitutional right to do that through the NSA and through these back doors that they get installed at the social media companies. There's always this like power corruption sort of thing at play here. And you can see it in the money. You can see it in the speech when they were able to remove the sitting president from one of the largest social media platforms in the world, or two of them. And that's not healthy for a democracy, to be able to control free speech and control what you do with your money. So Bitcoin is really the only technology that we have, and this is why it was created in 2008 when Satoshi Nakamoto created it and released it anonymously, because one, it's nobody between you and your wealth. That's the one thing with Bitcoin. There's no counterparty. So it's you are holding the keys to your own wealth. There's no bank. There's nobody to say, oh, you can't make that payment. There's nobody you don't have to ask anybody to withdraw your Bitcoin from any wallet. You control the Bitcoin. So it was to remove counterparties from the system, which takes it back kind of more towards a gold standard, towards like that commodity-based money that has been throughout history in a digital world. And the second thing was for you to be able to have the ability to make a payment to anybody anywhere without your free speech being limited. So I think like when you think about it from that perspective, it's more than just, oh, it's a new form of money and it's an investment and the number's going to go up. I think it's more like because it's decentralized and because it's kind of based off of free speech, property rights, these founding principles of the United States, and because it's helping with the energy grid in places like Texas with Bitcoin mining. It's a big industry. It supports a lot of jobs. It actually helps green the energy grid and it's helped with flare gas capping and all this stuff. Like there's a lot of positive benefits that the politicians are starting to get. Like if I get behind Bitcoin, it's this sort of freedom technology that plays well with passionate Americans that love their rights. It's like your gun and your Bitcoin wallet and your free speech. Plus, there's like lots of economic benefits to it. And then as Donald Trump and others in his cabinet or his inner circle, I guess his advisors, Bessent, Howard Lutnick, Elon, all these guys that are around him started to kind of understand that this is the new oil. This is the new gold in a way. It's like a digital version of a new form of a commodity, and you're unable to control it or stop it because it's been tried in other countries, and even the United States tried to do it in the early days of Bitcoin, and they realized pretty early that you can't stop Bitcoin. The only thing you can do is like make it harder for people to use Bitcoin. But the benefits of adopting Bitcoin as a strategic reserve asset and becoming the Bitcoin superpower, like making America the superpower of Bitcoin, is going to far outweigh any benefits you'd get from stopping people from being able to have control over their money, because the alternative is a CBDC. And that's where it's more control. It's the central bank and the government have more control over what you do and say with your money, and that leads to social credit scores and all that stuff. So I think I'm pretty happy the way that it's gone this last year with the United States becoming more of like a supporter of Bitcoin, Bitcoin mining, and adopting a Bitcoin treasury, because that's a good partner to have, honestly. If especially if the country is being run by someone who's more aligned with like free speech and property rights and things like that. Now, is it going to come to bite us in the ass in 10 years if something happens and there's like a far left, a left populist movement comes in and they they put in a CBDC and then they confiscate all the Bitcoin and sell it all and then ban exchanges and businesses from using Bitcoin? But I don't think that's going to happen. I think that the Overton window's kind of like shifted here. And just like Wall Street has kind of captured um, the regulators, really. I mean, the Treasury and the central bank, like the Federal Reserve, the Treasury, Wall Street, it's a revolving door, right? Like you see people going back and forth between all these institutions, between like the private market and the regulators. So they're like regulating themselves, and they're getting jobs at the brokers, the broker dealers, and the member banks and stuff like that. So yeah, of course, like when the derivatives industry came up in the 90s and then caused massive problems for municipalities and public companies that were buying these insane toxic derivatives, these synthetic derivatives that Wall Street came up with in the 90s. A lot of people had the same thought. They had, well, isn't the government going to ban this stuff? It kind of doesn't make any sense. It's so risky. Well, Wall Street kind of co-opted the government. The lobbying worked, and they were able to like softly regulate Wall Street, and the derivatives industry ended up becoming so big that it caused the 2008 financial collapse. So, and still the derivatives industry is just massive right now. So I think the ability of American capitalists to lobby and capture the government is too great. And from what I saw over the last 3 years, it feels like they did the same thing with crypto, like but it was Silicon Valley, Andreessen Horowitz, and all these Silicon Valley firms that have billions tied up in these crypto coins and like DeFi and stable coins and all that stuff. Coinbase, all these big exchanges that are just casinos, basically, like crypto casinos. Like Wall Street is just basically a casino. They did the same thing with crypto, but it's now Silicon Valley's turn, and they were able to lobby and they were able to capture like all these Congress people and senators and push for all these soft regulations, and that they've kind of co-opted. Look, Trump is launching like scam coins. He's like launching $100 million scam coins and taking hundreds of millions of dollars of like scam payments in from all these crypto companies buying his coin. So it's kind of like we live in this world of like scamming is legal now, and like crime is legal. And honestly, if you were to try to choose between the two extremes where free market libertarian crime is legal, you have to like individual responsibility. If you get scammed, it's your own fault. Sue them, take your money back that way. Or communism, CBDCs, your free speech is muted, you're censored on the internet, you can only buy what's sanctioned, price controls, all this stuff. Over the last little bit, I think I'm going to take the scamming president that just opens up everything and we have free markets, and then like I'm just going to advocate for Bitcoin. I don't like all that other crypto stuff. I kind of find it's all scammy. I don't really like it. But really, we were looking at two choices in the end. It was they're going to do that. They're going to try to control everything and make it really hard for you to have free speech and property rights on the internet and in a digital world, they were going to try to control everything. That would have been bad for us. So I guess we'll take the scamming with the ability to mine Bitcoin and hold your own keys.
I know I'm running out of time here with you, but that's where my concern comes into play because they are centralizing the government in the United States by these investments that they're moving towards, and you're still seeing censorship. I mean, it's personally happened to me on X. It's personally happened to me on YouTube, and that's where I wonder how Bitcoin will play a part in all this because, to what you said, it's decentralized, but the government doesn't want any of us roaming around, right? Like after COVID, like you saw during COVID, they were even shutting down national parks. It's something as simple as national parks. They didn't want anybody. They don't want anybody roaming. So what will they do to counter this? To take away any type of sovereignty that's left, if there's any at all. Because to me, too, the CBDC, I mean, it's already, you do everything on your phone. People can't live without these things. I mean, these things are your lifeline. So, and I've had the boomers, reach out and they're pissed at me for saying this. Well, I don't do it. Okay, I get it, but you'll be gone in 10 years. And the next wave of people, they are so reliant on. People can't even walk across the street without looking at their phone.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a I think it's a trend that was kind of elastic banded as far as it is going to go in that one direction, and I feel like we're on the way back now to kind of sane equilibrium thanks to encryption and AI and Bitcoin. Things like the technology that is a kind of deflationary, decentralizing force that is a cap on government control for those sorts of things like privacy, free speech, and money, because you can't stop it. And they've tried many times to stop it, but they can't. So when enough people are choosing to use the thing, then it's very difficult for them to enforce the rules. Just like they were unable to stop file sharing, like it's illegal to download movies on BitTorrent. They were unable to stop people. The only thing they were able to do was outcompete the file sharing movement by making Netflix and all these other streaming platforms more convenient, so much so that you'd want to pay for it. So the market chose to opt into centralized entertainment delivery because it was better. But thankfully, I don't think the government is going to ever try to make your digital money better than we can get with Bitcoin and even stable coins. I think they're going to want to keep going for more control, more surveillance. They believe that they can pull levers and have maximum employment and stable prices like that. They literally believe that they can control the price of money and what people do with their money, and they can print the money, and it's all going to be good because 2% inflation is going to keep the Ponzi rolling, and everybody's going to be happy with it. And obviously, there's like a lot of people that are not happy with that. So I don't have any worries about the government competing with Bitcoin and encryption by making a better version. I just don't see it. I think we got a long time before the government is going to compete in that way. And then otherwise, like they just can't stop it. So now, thankfully, this impulse is back towards embracing it and realizing that you should not try to be everybody's daddy, and that people can make their own choices and make their own mistakes, and you don't have to take care of everybody, and you don't need to know what everybody says and does. So I hope that continues in the world. And I think, yeah, like I said, AI, Bitcoin, cryptography, these are all decentralizing forces, and we're seeing decentralized networks grow. So I just feel like it's beyond their control at this point. They tried and they failed, and now we're seeing the result is like, more free speech, more freedom, more choice, freedom of choice for the money we use. So, yeah, I don't have any worries right now. The only thing that would worry me is maybe in 20 or 30 years, if the United States actually does go to some sort of dual commodity like gold and Bitcoin standard or something like that, where the dollars are backed by gold and Bitcoin or something like that, and somehow Bitcoin becomes part of the reserve, then at that point, then we're susceptible to a 6102 attack. the only reason there was a ban on gold ownership was because they were on the gold reserve, right? Like the gold standard. So they didn't want Americans to be able to redeem their shitty dollars for real gold. So they banned gold ownership so that they could print money without having the treasury get depleted of their gold. So right now there's no mechanism there. There's no reason why they would ban Bitcoin because the dollar's not backed by Bitcoin. You can't redeem your printed dollars for Bitcoin, right? So if ever that is the case where the dollar, the fiat currency is backed by Bitcoin and they want to print their way out of a depression or something like that, then there's a risk of a 6102 attack because they want to keep their valuable gold in Bitcoin and they don't want the citizens redeeming it for that. So maybe, we'll see what happens. Who knows, dude? Like, I never thought we would be at this point. This is crazy that we're at a point now where the federal government of the United States is pro Bitcoin. The president owns Bitcoin. All this inner circle owns Bitcoin. They've got a Bitcoin strategic reserve. It's pretty wild. So anything's possible the next 15 years. I mean, anything is literally possible now. It is like Trump is literally saying he wants the United States to be the Bitcoin superpower of the world. That could become a pretty wild, $10 million Bitcoin type of wild. So who knows in 15 years where things are going to be.
Where can people find you, Brad?
I'm at Brad Mills Can on Instagram if you want to follow me on there. I don't know if any of your followers are interested in learning about Bitcoin, but I post, videos and stuff on Instagram there. And, I know this is confusing for a lot of people, like especially people that are maybe a little older, maybe not as technology native, maybe they're more into gold and other assets. But yeah, if anybody has any interest in learning about Bitcoin and like maybe you're thinking, I got some, I'm an entrepreneur, I had an exit of my company, or I'm a real estate investor, I'm not so interested in the continuing to invest in more real estate, maybe I want to get some Bitcoin. Yeah, if anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to kind of shoot you in the direction that you might need to help out on your Bitcoin journey. So yeah, message me on Instagram.
Also on X?
Oh yeah, I'm on Twitter as well, but I'm more active on my DMs on Instagram. I don't really check my DMs a lot on Twitter. So if anybody wants to just follow me on Twitter, they can too. But if you want to actually ask me a question or whatever, I'm more active on Instagram.
And one more thing, website too?
Bradmills.ca is the website, but that's just kind of like a placeholder for my investments and stuff like that. So not really much going on there.
Brad, I appreciate this. I'd love to have you back on and we could talk further. And as we see events unfold. So thank you for coming on, and look forward to following your work and more conversations ahead.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Mic drop.